Isabel earns $63,000 a year. She pays every bill on time. She does not feel like she overspends. And yet, at the end of the month, her account shows $812. No emergency fund, no investment account compounding in the background. 6 years of income. Almost nothing built. This is not a salary problem. This is a design problem, one the Japanese solved over a century ago. In Japan, there is a word, tsutsumashi. It translates roughly to modestly reserved. It describes someone who lives quietly, not because they cannot afford more, but because they understand something about money that most Americans were never taught. This is quiet wealth, not the performance of financial success, but the construction of it. Wealth in the Japanese financial tradition is not shown. It is built. Silently, deliberately, through systems so small they look trivial until you run the math. 6 of those systems are ones Isabel could start tonight. One of them will feel counterintuitive. That one returned the most money per hour spent. Here is exactly what each one returned. Habit 1. Forget the budgeting apps. They were engineered to make spending invisible. Zero friction between impulse and charge. Kakeibo does the opposite. A $3 notebook, a pen, and the requirement to write each purchase by hand at the end of the day. A pause between impulse and action creates a gap. In that gap, behavior changes. The filter rewrites itself within weeks. By week 3, the question before every purchase becomes, is this worth writing down tonight? Her discretionary spending dropped by $400 in the first month. The notebook cost $3. 47% of Americans enter each year without any budget at all. The average American underestimates their impulse spending by nearly $300 a month. Invisible leakage before a single conscious decision has been made. Kakeibo does not fix spending. It makes spending visible. Invisible is halfway to changed. Habit 2. In Japan, wasting something useful carries a word, Mottainai. An emotional response, somewhere between regret and quiet shame, triggered when something of value is discarded before its time. American households waste roughly 30% of everything they buy in food, around $2,100 per year discarded before it is ever used. Isabel started photographing everything she threw away from her fridge for a week. Half a bag of spinach, leftover rice, expired yogurt, a quarter of a rotisserie chicken. 1 week of photos, $40 of food in the trash, $2,000 a year. She began meal planning from what she already had before buying anything new. She started freezing leftovers the day she cooked them. Her grocery spending dropped by 30% in 3 months. Not because she bought cheaper food, but because she started treating what she already owned with the same attention she gave to new purchases. Mottainai is not deprivation. It is the financial discipline of finishing what you already paid for. Mottainai doesn't stop at the fridge. Average textile waste runs roughly 82 pounds per person each year. Clothes worn once or twice, then replaced not because they failed, but because something newer appeared. Phones replaced every 2 to 3 years on devices engineered to last 4. The waste is not just environmental, it is financial, and it is invisible until you name it. For most American households, applying Mottainai to food and physical goods alone is worth 4 figures a year. Habit 3. Hara Hachi is the Japanese practice of stopping at 80% full, not stuffed, not completely satisfied. 80%. Applied to money, live on 80% of your income. The U.S. personal savings rate sits at roughly 4%. The average American saves 4 cents of every dollar earned. The average American also carries about $6,500 in credit card debt at 22.4% interest. 4 cents saved for every dollar earned, while that debt compounds at 22%. The net position for many households is not savings. It is slow erosion dressed up as discipline. On a $60,000 salary, a 4% savings rate produces $2,400 a year. A 20% rate produces $12,000. Over 30 years at 8% average returns, that 16-point gap becomes the difference between roughly $293,000 and $1.47 million. The math does not require extraordinary income or dramatic sacrifice. It requires 16 percentage points applied consistently. Violet is a hospital administrator in Dallas. She calculated 80% of her take-home, $3,600 out of $4,500. The hardest part had nothing to do with numbers. Her brain had spent years treating $4,500 as her real salary, the full amount, the one she felt she had earned the right to use. Reducing that felt like deprivation, even when she could calculate exactly where the $900 was going. What shifted was the frame. She stopped treating the $900 as money she was restraining herself from spending. She started treating it as money already deployed, already working, just not yet visible. $3,600 was not a budget. It was her salary. Within 6 weeks, $3,600 felt normal. The baseline had reset. The same hedonic adaptation that had quietly raised her expectations each time her income grew was now running in reverse. It works in both directions. In 18 months, Violet had saved and invested over $16,000, not through discipline, through a decision about which number was real. Habit 4. Chokin is the habit of saving before you spend, before you decide what you need, before your brain has a chance to reframe what remains. The standard American savings approach is residual. Earn, spend, save whatever is left. The problem is that what is left is almost always close to zero. Spending expands to fill available income. This is not a character flaw. It is how attention is distributed when no structure exists. Ryan earns $4,800 a month. Under normal conditions, his savings rate hovers around 3%, roughly $144 a month, not because he is irresponsible, but because the structure around his money makes spending the default. Under Chokin, an automatic transfer moves $960, 20% of his income, to his investment account the morning after his paycheck lands. His available spending becomes $3,840. He adjusts within 2 months. He does not miss money he never sees. After 1 year, $11,520 saved versus the $1,728 his previous approach would have produced. The money was always there. It simply needed a destination before spending reached it first. American credit card balances topped $1.28 trillion by the close of 2025. Most of that debt did not come from emergencies. It came from the gap between income and intentional structure. Chokin closes the gap before it opens. Most financial advice assumes discipline is the missing ingredient. Chokin assumes structure outlasts willpower. Habit 5. Remember the counterintuitive habit from the beginning, the one that returned the most money per hour spent? This is it. While every piece of financial advice focuses on what to add, Osoji focuses entirely on what is already leaving. The Japanese annual deep clean applied to finances, a deliberate audit of everything running in the background without your active attention. Every subscription, every automatic renewal, every charge you approved once and forgot. The average American underestimates their monthly subscription costs by $133. That is $1,596 per year in payments you believed you understood. Isabel's first Osoji uncovered $318 a month in forgotten charges, a streaming service not opened in 4 months, a gym membership from a location that moved, a software subscription renewing on a card from 2 years ago. $3,816 a year leaving her account without a single deliberate decision. Set one evening aside each year. Pull every bank and credit card statement from the past 12 months. Cancel anything you cannot remember actively choosing in the last 30 days. 2 hours. Potentially $3,816 returned. Habit 6. Kaizen means continuous improvement, but the Japanese definition of continuous is not the American one. American financial culture defaults to dramatic resets. Stop dining out entirely. Save 40% starting now. Eliminate every non-essential beginning Monday. These plans fail because the brain treats sudden large change as a threat. The stress response fires. The old behavior returns within weeks. This is not weakness. It is neurology. Kaizen works around it. Reduce your dining out spending by 10%, not 50, not 30, 10. That reduction is invisible to your daily life. You barely register it. Because you barely register it, you maintain it. Because you maintain it, you compound it. 10% less impulse shopping the following month, 1 fewer subscription the month after. Each adjustment compounding quietly in the same direction over time. Clothing, home furnishings, and electronics, the 3 categories most driven by aesthetic dissatisfaction, add up to roughly $9,500 per American per year. A 25% reduction redirects $2,375 annually. At 8% over 25 years, that becomes roughly $183,000. Not from one dramatic decision, from barely noticing 1% at a time. The most powerful version of Kaizen is the one Andrew found. He defined what his money was actually for. being fully present for his daughter's childhood without the weight of financial stress. After that, impulse purchases became irrelevant, not because he had more discipline, but because each one had become an obstacle to something he had already decided mattered more. In his first year, he redirected $2,375, the exact 25% cut from clothing and electronics the math predicted. Not because he tracked every purchase, because the target made the choice automatic. He did not need more willpower, he needed a clearer target. That is what these 6 habits share. None of them require you to want it more. Each one was built for a brain that prefers now over later and works with it anyway. Between the invisible leakage she plugged and a 15% savings rate she automated, Isabel had over $18,000 in savings 12 months after staring at that $812 balance. Her income did not change. She did not take on extra work. She did not stop spending on things she genuinely valued. She changed the architecture around her money. The friction before each purchase, the sequence of when savings left the account, the annual hours spent auditing what was draining out invisibly. This is quiet wealth. The Japanese call it tsutsumashi, living below the noise of visible consumption, not because you cannot afford to perform it, but because you have decided the balance sheet matters more than the display. If you are already disciplined with money, these systems are the upgrade that converts discipline into structure that runs without your daily attention. If you have been spending freely and watching the balance refuse to move, this is not a willpower problem. Your brain is wired for near-term reward. Kakeibo, Chokin, Osoji, Kaizen. Each was designed to work with that wiring, not against it. Quiet wealth is not built in dramatic moments. It is built by small systems running quietly, compounding in the same direction for long enough that most people around you will not notice until the day it cannot be ignored. You only need a notebook, a pen, and the willingness to pay attention. You now know 6 systems the Japanese have used for over a century to build quiet wealth without dramatic change. But there is one account most people use to store those savings that quietly works against everything these habits build. The balance grows each month. It feels like progress. But there is a second number your bank never shows you. And once you see it, it reframes every dollar you leave sitting there. The video on screen right now shows you exactly what that number is. The part about what your bank's 1% actually means when you run it through the rule of 72 will change how you look at every statement you receive. Watch it.